Hey, everybody.
Hey, Tom.
Hey, Tom.
Hey, Juarez.
Hi.
Hi.
So as people are just coming in, I've got, and I'll just probably end up repeating this a couple times, but we've just got a slideshow going that just shows all the pieces that are in the show, so that if you have not had the opportunity to either kind of walk through the gallery that it's in or actually kind of take a trip through the website that we have, you'll get a chance to see kind of the work that makes up this show, including the work by the panelists that we're going to be hearing from tonight.
So are we allowed to have favorites?
I don't see a problem with that. As long as it's mine.
I got bad news for you.
I'm okay with bad news.
Well, there's so many good ones. It would be hard to pick a single favorite. Can we pick several favorites?
Oh, I think that's probably the only reasonable solution, to be honest.
I heart this one and this one and this one.
Yeah.
I had 4 favorites when I started, and then I just came back to one over and over and over again. And so that must be the favorite.
That seems like a reasonable selection process.
Just kept on bugging me. Then I started stalking the artist on Instagram. So I was like, it must be my favorite, because I'm not doing that to anybody else right now.
Well, now you got to tell us.
There you go.
Oh, okay. I'll tell you when it comes back around. If oh, you got to hit play again.
I do. I got to do that. I didn't realize it had stopped. That's not working.
And I learned something quite specific from the experience of participating in this, and that was that I'm not contributing to any other virtual gallery shows because my work specifically is not good digitally. It's an analog intimate experience almost all the time. And I realized how much trouble you were having with my particular piece, getting it to be visible on in a digital format. It's just so difficult. So
no, that was, I feel literally terrible about that, but I could not get that to work right.
Yeah, no, don't feel terrible. I think it's like I make problematic work. And you could say that a lot of ways, but what I mean to say is that I make work that is difficult intentionally.
Yeah. Hey, is the slideshow working again?
No.
Yeah, it says it is, but it's not.
It's trippy. I think we're seeing your screen. Yeah.
Yeah, that was
on your screen.
me seeing me through your screen's camera eyeball.
That's some Inception level stuff right there.
Yeah. I was like asleep, but then I wasn't asleep.
Well,
3 levels deep.
Are we going to try to let it go through one more time, or?
I was planning on it, but I'm having some technical difficulties here, so maybe not.
Okay. Well, I can start talking, and then if it comes up, we can shift gears.
Okay.
But thanks everyone so much for joining us today. We've got a good crew, more people than we could fit in the gallery space, so that's good.
Yeah.
A good use of the medium. My name is Lauren Evans. I am assistant professor of art here at Stanford University, and I'm also the gallery director. And I just wanted to say hi and welcome you all here. to this. This is the first time we've done a virtual gallery event really like this. We had something for our student show in the spring, but this is the first time working with external artists. So we're really excited that all of these artists were able to join us for this from all over the country. So thank you all for being here and for participating in this show. If you haven't already, if you're on Samford's campus, student, faculty, staff, the exhibition is up in our gallery in Swearingen Hall and will be up. It's actually been extended a bit from the original date, so it'll be up through October 23rd. So you still have a chance to see it. We just have a limitation of 10 people in the gallery at a time. So we ask no large groups go there. But the gallery is open from 9 to 4 Monday through Friday, and we'd love for you to see the work in person. However, if you're unable to see the work in person, the full exhibition is online on the dreamdeferred.com website, which you now have all seen because you've accessed the link to get to the Zoom call. So I encourage you to spend some time with the work there, and that's where you'll find more information about the artists and the individual pieces, and some of which we'll hear about today. And my understanding is that that'll remain live for a while, right? Is that correct, Professor Shaka?
Yes.
Yeah. So even beyond, like, that's a resource you can share with others beyond, you know, the end of our exhibition here at Samford. So I wanted to thank, I don't see them here, but I wanted to acknowledge and thank the sponsors of our exhibition, our gallery series here at Samford, John and Marsha Floyd. So we really appreciate their support of the work that we do, and it wouldn't be possible without them. So thank you to the Floyds. And to the artists also for contributing their work and making this possible. We weren't sure, you know, how the gallery was going to function moving into this very, you know, different fall season, but it's been great that we've been able to mount actual physical work and be able to extend our reach by doing things like this. So thanks for everyone for being a part of that. So from here on out, I'm going to shift the mic to Professor Jeff Shaka, who has organized this exhibition and print exchange and is also a participating artist in the show. So we'll hear a bit about his work that's included in the exhibition as well. And he will be introducing all of the artists who have joined us today, and as well as we'll move in a little bit later to a Q&A. So if you have questions, jot those down, hold on to those, and we'll open up for questions at the end. And we'll explain a little bit more about how to do that later. So, all right, thank you so much, Professor Shaka. It's all you.
Thank you, Lauren. Well, first of all, I just want to thank everyone for being here. I appreciate you guys giving up some time on your Tuesday evening to join us. This has been just a very enjoyable and difficult process to do, just putting this together, and really difficult from kind of the emotional aspect of it, almost more than anything. And so I have a couple kind of prepared things that I actually wrote down that I'm going to kind of walk through, just so that I don't leave out something I intended to say. But while I do that, I'm going to see if I can get that slideshow running one more time, so that you have that to look at instead of having to look at me.
There we go.
That working?
It's the screen's back up.
All right, sweet. So, but I'd first like to acknowledge that we at Samford University are on the traditional land of the first people of Birmingham and most of Alabama, the Muskogee people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Muskogee Creek tribe. We can't have a conversation about racial injustice in America without acknowledging that our country began with the genocide and removal of the indigenous people who lived and cared for these lands long before we arrived. I'd also like to thank Rick Griffith, who actually was the first person that I ever heard challenge us with the idea of land acknowledgements, and it's something that really stuck with me since I heard him speak at an AIG event earlier this year. But I'd like to also read the poem from which we derive the name for this exhibition. And this is a poem entitled Harlem by Langston Hughes. It was written in, or published in 1951. I'm not sure the exact year he wrote it. And I am not a poet, and I will do my best to read this with the kind of, I guess, expression that it deserves. But what happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? And whether we look at the origin story of our nation through the lens of when Europeans set foot on North American shores in the 15th century, or from the point in which we declared our independence from Britain in 1776, there has been a thread of Eurocentric white supremacy that has been present from the very, very beginning. And whether it was the genocide and systemic removal of America's indigenous population, the abhorrent belief that people could be property to be bought and sold and forced into labor, or the withholding of supposedly unalienable rights from people simply based on their non-white status. This is a large, inescapable portion of the foundation of our nation. And history has seen progress. However, when your baseline is that base, improvements don't necessarily equate solutions. With each small measure of change, white people have yielded some of their privilege and feel like great progress has been made. All they've done is merely lessen the inequitable burden on our minority brothers and sisters, rather than work to ensure that things are actually and genuinely equal. When George Floyd died under the knee of a troublingly apathetic Minneapolis police officer this past May, the country exploded in protest with cries for justice, for equality, and Black Lives Matter. And many white people incredulously respond by saying, well, all lives matter. But if evidence shows that all lives don't matter equally in our country, then that statement cannot be true. All lives cannot matter until Black lives matter just as much as white lives do. Believing that art can be a tool for stimulating conversation, we sought to add creative visual voices to a conversation that's been present for hundreds of years. We sought to organize a collective of 30+ diverse artists to create each a piece in response to racial injustice and inequality in America. What we got was an enormously talented group of 31 individuals from all parts of the continental US and Puerto Rico, who represent different ethnic, cultural backgrounds, genders, ages, perspectives, and experiences. We got responses that embodied emotions that are as diverse as our collective itself. We all use various forms of printmaking as our media, creating 35 portfolios, enabling each participant to get a full set of work and have the freedom to show the work wherever they are. Currently, at this moment, the show is installed in galleries in Birmingham and Jacksonville, Alabama, as well as Chicago, Illinois, with at least 5 other shows in the work. This creates the possibility for the work that we're discussing tonight to be stirring up conversation in multiple places at once. So thank you guys all for joining us tonight. We're gonna hear from 6 artists that participated. We'll also close out the night with some Q&A. So as Lauren mentioned, if you have questions that come up as the work is being discussed or being shown, I just would ask you guys to kind of make note of that. Zoom has a feature where you can actually kind of raise your hand if you click by your name in the participants list. And so I've got some people who are going to be watching for the raising of hands, and we can kind of call on people as we need to. If that doesn't work well, we can just have people unmute themselves and ask their questions that way. So with that being said, and I hope I can kind of get this to work the way it's supposed to. But I'd just like to read a brief bio for each of the artists that that are gonna be kind of presenting and talking about their work tonight. And then I've got a kind of a slideshow of the work they did for this portfolio in this exhibition, as well as 3 other works that they felt were representative of the type of work that they do. So first off, we're gonna be hearing from Juarez Hawkins. She is an educator, an artist, and curator. And as co-creator of gallery programs at Chicago State University, she has organized exhibitions from the permanent collection, as well as student work and established artists. Recent curatorial projects include Black Clay at Chicago State, Radical Futures at the Museum of Contemporary Art, and Bill Walker, Urban Griot at the Hyde Park Art Center. Juarez is a member of Sapphire and Crystals, a collective of African-American female artists. So in the typical Zoom air clap, if you guys would welcome Juarez. So I'll hand the mic over to her and she can talk about her work and just her experience with this. And let me see if I can't get this going.
Well, thank you all. Thank you, Jeff, for having me. And thank you to the university for hosting this event. I'll jump right in. This is my lino cut. It's called Running While Black. And probably couldn't be more timely because it speaks, one, for me of how I've been coping with COVID and isolation and all that. And for me, a lot of my sort of healing coping strategy has been running. Since I can't get to the gym, it's like, well, I'm going to make the park my playground and I'm going to get out here and, you know, kind of keep my hips in check and everything. And with the shooting of Ahmaud Arbery, it really threw me for a loop. And coming from a place where ideas of lynching, the destruction of Black bodies from a consciousness perspective really isn't nothing new to me. What we're talking about are the same sort of things that Ida B. Wells was talking about almost a century earlier. But to have it come so close to me, the idea that, wow, you know, any of us can go out for a run. Who hasn't, of people amongst us who are runners, who hasn't stopped to maybe window shop? Who hasn't stopped to gaze at a car that you admire? Who hasn't perhaps stopped to peek in at a vacant house or new construction? And so the idea that your life could arbitrarily just, you know, be snuffed out just because someone feels like hunting or for sport, you know, it's something that intellectually I've always known that's happened. I'm aware of publications like Without Sanctuary, which covers like the history of lynching postcards in America. But to have it kind of come home and have it couched in an activity that I'm doing. You know, running's not criminal. Ahmaud Arbery wasn't a criminal. And so I decided, you know, when I was asked to put together a piece for the show, I actually came up with the idea while running. So that idea of just sort of dealing with, and actually I didn't run for a while after that shooting. It took me a moment to kind of get back in the sync where I felt safe enough to just get out and run again. And so I decided to couch it in my own experience and couch it in kind of my own sort of body consciousness of what it means to live in a country where it, to me, it just really feels like it's open season on us. So on the flip side, I'm going to say I'm heartened by the attention and the expanded protests and things like that. It's just sometimes you sort of think we're repeating this history, this protest is being repeated, and it's like, man, you know, we didn't learn. And, you know, I wonder, you know, did we relax too much after the first wave, you know, of the civil, well, I won't say first wave, but the 1960s, 70s wave of the civil rights movement? Did I get too relaxed to think that I can just go running through the park or go running through the neighborhood with impunity? How dare me? And so I'm going to stop at that and open up for questions, but also to open up the floor for other people, because you teachers know I'm an art professor myself, so I can ramble a little bit. But that's just, you know, sort of the beginning of my genesis and where I was coming from with that. Oh, wow. Hey, I remember these pieces. So a little bit more. I really like lino cut. I love carving. I think it's really, it's akin to my other side of my practice, which is ceramic sculpture. And so that need to carve and to make things. This piece is from one of the Superstitions portfolios from Arceo Press. And it deals with sort of the myths and superstitions, dare we say, that we carry. So this idea of kissing it up to God is really a very much an urban idea of, dare we say, a rite of purification, but something so simple. And I think some people call it the 5-second rule. Like if you dropped your cookie on the floor, you can pick the cookie up within 5 seconds and it's still safe to eat. Well, in my culture, you know, if you kiss it up to God, that's purifying. It might not work for ice cream, but, you know, for a good number of treats, you can still retrieve it. So I dealt with that as, you know, purification ritual. And also too, I just want to give a shout out to Thomas Lucas at Hummingbird Press, who very graciously printed my piece this time around. So, you know, just to mention, he also has work in the show, and you'll be hearing from him shortly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Juarez. I appreciate kind of hearing just more about your kind of experience and just thoughts that went behind this, and you know, it's definitely adds a lot of value to something that I already appreciated. So thank you. Next, we'll hear from Pepe Coronado. He was born in the Dominican Republic, and he got his MFA from the Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore. He's the founder of Coronado Print Studio in Austin, Texas, and New York City, a collaborative space with a concentration on print projects with Caribbean descent American artists, and founding member of the collective Dominican New York Proyecto Grafica, former master printer for Pyramid Atlantic, Maryland, the Hand Print Workshop International in Virginia, the Siri Print Project in Austin, Texas. And he has taught printmaking at Purchase College School of Art and Design at SUNY, the Corcoran College of Art, Georgetown University, and at MICA in Baltimore. He's a visiting artist at Self-Help Graphics in Los Angeles and exhibits his work and the Coronado Print Studio collection nationally and internationally. So again, the silent air clap for Pepe.
Well, first, again, thank you for the opportunity to be talking to everybody and to be part of the portfolio. By the way, great box. I love the box and having all the work here. Will the piece come up?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, man. I'm just...
I don't want to talk about Juarez's work because he already did a really good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So talking about the piece for the portfolio, it was interesting to get the invitation to be part of this project because it's an area of work that I have been doing in terms of dealing with historical facts and re-looking at events in recent history and past history, like this piece that is the broken country that was done last year for a project at MOLA in LA. So the recast idea came by obviously all the issues that are coming up and all the issues that are part of the conversation now, which most of it have to do with history. And the reason we talk about race is because there is no equality. So where did that come from? So as we look back of all these events and having conversation with people, especially a lot of white people have told me, oh, I didn't know about this, and you know, this issue with police, the creation of police, the surveillance of Black and brown people, the protection of white property, and all these things, they have this history embedded in the identity of this country. And again, we have to deal with indigenous oppression and slavery and racism and sexism. So this white supremacy structure has been started to be analyzed. And a lot of people are surprised where does it come from? How this systematic thing happen, right? And a lot of people have benefit from that privilege, even if they're not racist, right? So that issue is very tricky because a lot of people have faced now like, oh, wow, I didn't know this oppression. I didn't know these numbers. I didn't know these things, right? And it's like, well, yeah, and part of your privilege come from that systematic structure. And education is the biggest issue, right? Education has been designed to overlook all this specific issue in this history that makes this white supremacy structure. So my idea with this piece is that all these elements have to be re-put back in the kiln and recast so we can relearn these histories, right? So a lot of people are like, they either are defending their privilege, right? As, oh no, racism had nothing to do with my success as a white man, right? And like, oh really? You know, so you got educated and, oh, but I come from a humble background. Yeah, but still, I'm not criticizing your background. Is the trajectory of the past and the doors they open up for you. Not all those doors were open for you because you are so amazing. You know, a lot of it came from because you are just, you know, part of that group, right? So those privileges are tough for people to accept, right? And you know, all of us that are from different backgrounds, we have faced these things in application and looking for jobs and looking for opportunities. And a lot of them are very subtle, but they're detrimental to the progress of things, right? So this recasting idea is what I'm interested in. There is never too late to relearn, right? And we have noticed that a lot of protesters are white kids and mixed race kids and a lot of different, right? Which is really, you know, this generation is a little more tangled up together, but a lot of people are asking, oh, how can I help? And the best help, the best way to help is that knowledge. You have to acquire that knowledge. I don't have to tell you this knowledge. How do I learn it? How did I run into it, right? It was not all by experience, it's by interest. And part of that comfort level of being in the majority society is that you don't have to deal with those things. You can ignore them because they don't affect you. So this recasting is this idea to, all we're asking is equality, right? Like there are some right-wingers that are freaking out, like, they're gonna come and take my shit. We're not gonna do to you what you have done to others. We only want equality. It's just opportunity. That's the whole idea of this thing. So all this artwork is so great to see the portfolio, to see all these different images and angles that people are taking from experiences, from reality, from ideals, from other things that have been done and said. So I'm glad that you guys have this initiative. Like I said, I have been doing this kind of work about history fact because of my island being the first colonized place in the continent. And a lot of it about this idea of decolonization. We have to decolonize. We have to understand what that concept means. We all have it because even if we're black, brown, whatever background you are, we are trained in this society. So we carry it too. So we have to be mindful of all these things. And a lot of artists have been doing work that are very relevant. And a lot of people are saying, oh, why is your work different now? It's like, no, I know people have been doing this work. We were just not listening 3 months ago, 6 months ago, you know what I mean? So this is becoming part of something that is being looked at more now, and that's very important. So, thank you again.
Oh, no, excellent. Thank you so much, Pepe. And I didn't want to start skipping through your work because I didn't want you to feel like I was like, flashing lights on and off on you. But here's a few more of his pieces.
Yeah, there is one piece, again, the Broken Country was done last year, and it's about this division that is being brewing, right? And look where it led to, right? And the idea of this piece is how do we put it back together? And it's kind of the same idea of the recast. We have to, the elements have been there. We just have to rearrange them and put it back and give it the right presence. So,
yeah.
I think the next piece is for another portfolio that we did for another collective, and it deals again this historical relationship between the U.S. and Dominican Republic and Haiti. But if you can go back, this piece was done also last year, and you have all these, these are just a few things that you can mention that are part of the issue, right? We have to remember, it's not like being negative or we're attacking this country or we're not being patriotic and all this stuff. No, these are real. These are reality. This is what defines this place, and we're trying to clean it up. We're trying to equalize it. So, you know, back the ways that things were, nations of law, this manifest destiny is still very clear out there. That is a driving force, and we're trying to say, yo, that doesn't include everybody. You need to calm down, man. Anyway, thank you.
Well, thank you, Pepe. And just to mention too, like we've got everybody's, all the artists' websites are visible on the slides, as well as their Instagram handles. And it's, these are artists that are actively creating a lot of really impressive work. And, we're just showing just a kind of a little bit of it tonight, but I'd encourage you guys to look into other things they're doing and check back and kind of follow them on social and stuff as well. So thank you so much, Pepe.
Sure.
Next, we'll hear from Maria Cristina Tavera. She is a Latinx artist, independent curator, and cultural organizer influenced by her transnational upbringing between Minnesota and Mexico. Her artwork investigates constructions of race, ethnicity, gender, national, and cultural identities. Tavera has a MA in Public Affairs and Leadership in the Arts from the University of Minnesota Humphrey School. She has received fellowships and grants from the Archibald Bush Fellowship, McKnight Visual Arts Fellowship, Smithsonian Latino Museum Studies Program, Museum of Modern Art, New York, Forecast Public Art, Minnesota State Arts Board, Metropolitan Regional Arts Council, and Institute of Mexicans Abroad. Tavera has exhibited and curated shows nationally and internationally, and her artwork can be found in the collections of the Wiseman Art Museum, Fargo Plains Museum, and the Tweed Museum of Art. Please welcome Maria.
Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate being invited too, because as Pepe stated, that overview of all the issues that are happening in our country right now and our inability to know where to begin. But I think what excites me most is that there is this push to start addressing these issues. And as Juarez gave the very specific examples of the violence that's been happening in the cities and other areas throughout the country, it's urgent that we start to acknowledge what's happening in our country and start finding terminology to describe it and start to decipher what can be done about it. So I really appreciate being invited and all the work that everyone's put in to make this happen, and the other artists as well. I actually began creating this screen print during the pandemic, but it was during the social unrest here in Minneapolis after the death of George Floyd. And it just spiraled as the pandemic and the unrest at the same time this past summer. And it's been really chaotic. And we are right in the heart of Powderhorn, which is the neighborhood right next to where it occurred. And you get frustrated and scared about what's happening, and at the same time wanting to try to find ways to express your concerns. So I appreciate being included in this portfolio. I actually really appreciated the poem of The Dream Deferred. Since I was young, it really made me think about poetry and want to be interested in poetry. So I was excited about the theme. And then I also saw parallels right now with the essential workers that are working in agricultural conditions in the fields. And so I thought of the poem as the metaphor, and does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, and the conditions that they're working in with the pesticides to begin with. But even more so now with the pandemic, there's been even more complicated issues that arise because they are working in crowded conditions and living in crowded conditions. So the pandemic is spreading faster in these areas. And then on top of that, even more recently with the fires, they're expected to continue working. And so I see their dream deferred and came up with the idea of Pizca de Esperanza, the Harvesting Hope, as a tribute to the essential field workers in the United States and their contributions to the food supply. This work is really undesirable, and the administration has stopped deportations because of the need to keep them in the country. But unfortunately, their conditions, their working conditions are so brutal because they don't have legal status. Many of them, the majority of them, are from Mexico, and then they have very unsafe health and working conditions without the benefits of health care. And so I thought to myself about the parallels between the injustice done with the Black community, and realized that there were parallels regarding the social and racial injustices with immigration enforcement strategies, such as racial profiling and the aggressive apprehensions and interrogations that happen as well in the brown communities. So this piece right here is the work that I did for this portfolio. And my hope is that we can find ways to not just talk about these topics, but also find solutions together. So, thank you. And then the other two works are other portfolios that I have participated in recently. This one was for Puerto Rico, Paper Promises, Promesas de Papel. And the other one is actually from the anthology of The Bridge Called My Back, which was a recent, oh no, that one, yeah.
This one? Sorry.
Are you challenging me here, Jeff? So yeah, this one is actually a portfolio in Spain. And so this one, my work tends to deal with issues in the Latino community, especially Latinos in the US. And this one is actually misunderstanding between the two, which are actually saying the same exact thing. So troubles with communication. And this is the Puerto Rico piece. And then the other one, this one is from Grabadolandia in Chicago at the National Museum of Mexican Art. And the theme here was actually from the anthology, which was The Bridge Called My Back. So essays by women of color. And this one is titled Escribes con tus uñas o con tu corazón, which is, do you write with your nails or do you write with your heart? So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, and I appreciate hearing that. Sorry, I skipped around a little prematurely. But again, it's great to hear more about things that I've been just appreciating with this portfolio for several months now. So thank you so much. Next, we'll hear from Thomas Lucas. He has a BFA in printmaking from the Tyler School of Art at Temple University in Philadelphia, and an MFA from the School of the Art Institute in Chicago. He is the founder and master printer at Hummingbird Press Editions. Thomas has published such artists as Carrie Marshall, William Conger, Richard Hunt, Willie Cole, and Barbara Jones Hogu, Jean Matulka, and Candida Alvarez. He has taught at Tyler School of Art and the School of Art of the Art Institute in Chicago, Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design, Penland School of Crafts, Air Mountain Oxbow, and is currently assistant professor at Chicago State University. Solo and group exhibitions at Chicago State University, Southside Community Art Center, Chicago, Elmhurst College, in Anamdi, and I probably mispronounced that terribly, Contemporary Miami, Museum of Greater Lafayette at Purdue in Indiana, and Skopelos, Greece, Israel, and Morelia, Mexico. Gallery representation by NNMD, Contemporary in Miami and Detroit. So please welcome Thomas Lucas.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, this is an interesting time for everybody, for me personally, for me and my family, both with not only the political unrest, the continuance of the political unrest, especially here in Chicago, going back to, what was going on with Mike Brown and the protests that were going on in Chicago. This sort of, oh, this is happening again. But us also being, sort of having to manage the COVID situation on top of all this, which is just, it just compresses it even more to a point where it's under high pressure. So I sort of go about my sort of way of working, both as an artist, as a facilitator, master printer, and as an educator with a sort of a high sort of emotional sort of response rate and sort of at the other side on the other side tolerance, because my work is really, it's reactionary, and my work, but it's reactionary just to like how I experience the world around me, and that's like goes back to just the everyday mundane things, and also connected to the things that I'm interested, which are most things mechanical. I mean, it's not by accident that I like using machines to make stuff like printmaking and things of that nature. There's something about man in metal, person in metal, sort of communicating through this other sort of medium. But it brings me to a piece that I was involved in, because I was going through this situation. It's like, I don't really make work about like that's political. It's much more about my emotional response to my experiences, and it's sort of silent in that way. But my friend Jefferson Pinder, who's an artist here, who's faculty at School of the Institute of Chicago as a performance artist, asked me to be a part of a project a couple of weeks ago. Because I was talking to him early on, because his work is very reactionary. He does videos that are about bringing a call and response to political issues with the Black community and the police, and he uses physical endurance as a medium to sort of manage that, to sort of bring that out, and often people are sweating and things of that nature, just like the idea of how you work through this. So he wrote me up into a second project that was sort of COVID friendly, which was us, 25 of us coming together and talking about surveillance. So we got together in our cars and cruised around one of the sort of known neighborhoods in Chicago that where police families live, and sort of to sort of give a sense of surveillance in their own sort of neighborhood as they sort of surveil other neighborhoods in the city. And it was very interesting, but it was, again, me into this, like, I'm working in this like reactionary way, cruising around this neighborhood and sort of circling around and sort of seeing us to be in this space, and, us to have access to the space. Like, what makes this space different from any other space? It's because of its occupants. Are we allowed here? Because like with that idea, my work, this piece that I put in the portfolio, which I want to thank Jeff and Lauren and Stanford University for including me. I love working in portfolios and love the idea of this community that's sort of moving around on paper and shared spaces. And just the idea of how something can just communicate so quickly in a sort of analog way, but it's such a tactile way to communicate a particular idea. And we're all sort of in this collective sort of like thought bubble about the subject. But the work is about yielding, right? The idea that how we have to yield to authority. And it's this general idea of authority, but then it depends on what your experience with the police is and how that yielding process is. Black and brown communities have had a sense of, like, almost since birth, this yielding concept of you have to look out, you have to kind of be careful, you want to be careful to go there. You're taught this because there's this presence, this authority, this entity that's been fortified to basically put you in check if something happens. Now, we're at a point where it's kind of become quite distorted. We're seeing how this is kind of twisting, and it's, you know, you're going back to the 60s. The piece has a police car that's on its roof, and that's like a Fairlane, probably early 60s Fairlane, and it's called When We Collide. And it's really the idea of when that yielding stops, and how, you know, our veiled view of, you know, our protectors becomes a wall, and the collateral damage that sort of happens as a result of that sort of collision. So the issue that the whole yielding sort of process, it just gets to a point where we're sort of, it wears on you, wears like a stone rolling in a river, to the point where there's no more traction. You know, you've run the tires bald, and now we're all sliding around, running into each other, and there's even more collateral damage. And, you know, then authority and privilege and all that stuff begins to mix together and really become a goulash that will no longer be separated. It's like this idea of really starting over and seeing how we really need to understand each other in a way that accepts everybody's sort of original background, even though the melting pot of America exists also, right? So people of brown and black, we're complex people. We have complex backgrounds. And then there's complexities within our own cultural specificities as it pertains to hierarchy of race within Latino culture, within Black culture. So we're not these simple individuals that could be put into this simple category and say, oh, okay, this is how these people are. Boom. You know, what's happening now is really the backlash of how sophisticated we are as individuals and as people as a whole. And we have this voice that's basically sounding back and working to try to educate in a system that no longer has ears, or has one less ear, or damaged ears, or doesn't want to hear. So you have this pushback, you have this sort of dulling, and you have the reality, oh, okay, there's no yielding now. These people don't want to yield, so we have to push. And we've seen this, you know, back in the 60s in the South and everything like that. We have the push, you know, we're not going to yield anymore. We're going to stay, and we're going to make a statement. We belong here. We have rights to be here, that sort of thing. So we're at a point now in society where it's become quite reactionary. So this piece is very much about that sort of potential result when folks sort of push back, and in some ways a reality to what was happening. I mean, it's, you know, burning up police cars and flipping them over and things of that nature. And really, you know, it goes back to that really simple story of like the grasshopper and the ant, right? And it's sort of like the realization that the ants understand how they're strong and how they can push back against the sort of lazy grasshoppers. So real basic, simple stuff. That's sort of how I think about things in a lot of ways, how parts come together to create a whole. But that's like my reaction and my sort of inspiration behind this particular piece in the portfolio as I was sort of putting it through. And it's significant that's actually on tone paper as well. So it becomes this visceral thing about, you know, what it is to not have white skin technically, to be on brown paper, on brown skin, the idea of surface, what that means as it pertains to an idea. So yeah, it's a tricky emotional thing. I talk to my students about it a lot, and how they're sort of managing it, and they're working as best they can. Some are very verbal, some are very quiet, but it is a new dialogue that we're having that is meaningful, but it's not mean-spirited, you know. And I think that's the other issue. I think we could take a point of view where we really mean-spirited and get to the point where it's like, I don't need to educate you about what you should already know. Because looking at me, you should understand what I had to deal with, period. I shouldn't have to tell you anything. And I was like that for a while. It's like with my neighbors and stuff, and it's like they're all chiming in, wearing Black Matters t-shirts, that sort of thing. And I'm like, I don't need to wear a Black Matters t-shirt. You know that, right? So don't, you know, it's like, you have to be careful right there. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, this is becoming something else where it's like you have to be a part of that to then sort of be included. Like, I have to have a BLM sign on my store for people to walk in. No. So it's sort of, that's the other sort of distortion that happens within the sort of social climate that we're in now. So the idea that we're doing what we're doing, Black and brown communities, whether it's in education, transferring information and, sharing stories is, I think, a really critical thing, but it's something that, we've been doing for a very long time. My shop, Hummingbird Press, I mean, I attract a lot of artists of color. They see the kind of work that I do. And working with people like Kerry James Marshall was, he's always been this sort of inspiration, because his idea behind his work is like, it's not about the culture Black, it's about the Black, the unequivocally colored Black, like this formal thing connected with the history of culture at the same time. So working with him has been very inspirational, and understanding who I am, coming from a place like Tyler at the time, a student of John Dow and Stanley Whitney, who are artists that don't work narratively. They're abstract African-American artists, which is a whole different sort of concept. So sort of navigate these spaces and try to make sense of them as best I can. But we're in a very challenging time right now because we have these sort of opposing forces, this pandemic and this sort of like socially conscious thing that's really very much speaking. It's speaking on its own now. So people are having to answer to it. So it's a very interesting time.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tom. I appreciate just your transparency with that, just in experiences outside of just the art that you create, and so again, it just really adds a lot of value to what I've been seeing. So thank you so much. Next, we'll hear from Poli Merochal. Poli is a Puerto Rican visual artist, filmmaker, and arts educator. After residing for 30 years in Los Angeles, she recently relocated to San Juan, Puerto Rico. Having lived in Barcelona, London, Boston, and LA, as well as having traveled extensively, has deeply influenced her world vision and her work. Her prints, paintings, mixed media, films, and videos mostly address environmental, social, political, and existential concerns through an expressionist lens. So please welcome Poli. Thank you.
Hi. Well, thank you for inviting me to participate in such a wonderful portfolio. I'm really happy. The whole issue of racism is very close to my heart because, I'm Puerto Rican, but I'm fair skin, but in my family we come in all shapes, and every time, like in the United States, people would ask me, oh, you're Puerto Rican, are you white? And I would say, white? I'm Puerto Rican. We are mixed, there's, no way around. But it bothered me that the whole, people are obsessed with the whole racial thing, especially white people. It's an obsession, like putting down people of color, because they feel threatened, basically. And it's, I had so many experiences, living in the United States for 30 years, and it always shocked me. You can't ever get used to the fact that some people will feel like they're superior, because of their skin color, and every time I could, I would try to confront people, which, doesn't sit very well with a lot of folks, I guess. But I always felt, there's no way you can keep quiet about it. And we're in the 21st century. Things should have changed a long time ago. And I think the biggest problem is there's no acknowledgement of the huge sin that slavery was, And until the United States and all the colonies, and all the colonists, like the British, the French, etc., until they acknowledge what they did and how much they owe in many ways, not just economically, but in every way you can think about, there's not going to be peace. You know, there's no way we can accept the fact that there's discrimination, that people are put down just because of their skin color, or because, you know, they were brought from Africa against their will, you know. And the way to justify such a horror is by demeaning people. There's no way we can say, oh, it's, you know, let's the past be the past, because they've never acknowledged it. So, I mean, we have the responsibility of taking a position and saying, you know what, I'm not playing the game. You know, you're wrong and there's no way around it. So, you know, the United States and, you know, Puerto Rico right now, we're part of the United States, we're a colony, which is another like stab in my heart. We have to acknowledge what happened, people, you know, and we have to atone in many ways. So I think my print it's about it, and it's about that pain that will never heal until there is a recognition, official recognition by the government, and saying, we messed up, this should never have happened. And we owe, Black and people of color, we owe, you know, everybody in the United States should say, we have to take a position where we finally create a healing force, you know. And that's what I want to say. So.
Thank you so much. And I'll kind of run through these other pieces that you provided, because it's really some really compelling work. So again, thank you so much. Thank you for your participation in the portfolio, but just in tonight too. We definitely appreciate hearing from you and just your explanation of kind of what went back into this. So I want to introduce Rick Griffith. He is a graphic designer, a letterpress printer, occasional writer. His work is an erudite exploration of language, history, politics, science, and ethics. He founded Matter, which over the last 2 decades has grown into an ambidextrous design consultancy, print shop, workshop, and retail bookstore. I would also like to just apologize for the way his work was documented. It's a beautiful print. It's incredibly difficult to photograph. And so what you will see as I flip over to his print does not do it justice. But I need to just offer that disclaimer. So thank you, Rick.
Yeah, no worries. And I'll tell you what, I'll read it for you guys. It's all text, and I'll take a moment to read it. And I'll begin by telling you guys just I'll give you a little context, and I'll read it, and then we'll come back and perhaps have time for some discussion. If there are 2 types of discussion and everything in between, one is the expression of violence. And in this expression, you know, there is this fear that all violence from Black people is justified. And therefore, there is a tremendous amount of fear in general of Black people. And there is a lot of material that goes a long way to kind of assist in the justifications of those fears. And then the other conversation is one of compassion and love. Everything in between, of course, because binary thinking is our enemy. this piece is a lot more to do with my daughters than it has to do with me. And I'm going to substitute a single word for you to try and illustrate what this piece is about. Here I go. I'm not here to tell you what to think or how to feel. I am here to show you what time we are living in and tell you exactly how much bullshit this woman will put up with. I dream often, and when I dream, I don't dream for me. I dream for you to stop hurting, stop being afraid, and get out of my way so I can do my thing. Not your thing, my thing. So I said the word daughters, I said the word woman, and I'll read it again with the right word in it. I am not here to tell you what to think or how to feel. I am here to show you what time we are living in and tell you exactly how much bullshit this Negro will put up with. I dream quite often, and when I dream, I don't dream for me. I dream for you to stop hurting, stop being so afraid, and get out of my way so I can do my thing. Not your thing, my thing. This particular piece wants to bring into focus our listening of these types of words and how much permission we might give a woman to say that to a man, and how little permission we might give a Black man to say this to anyone. And what I'm trying to focus on is that this is the kind of radical compassion that I have. I've stopped trying to conceive of the world that is better with me in it. A little bit like sort of perhaps what Moses might teach us is like, just know that you're on the right path and that you're with your people on the right path, but you may never see the world that you wish for. And I'm on to this other idea, which is if I pray for my oppressor, then this is actually finding the root of all suffering. Because it is my oppressor's suffering that causes my suffering. It is the idea that my oppressor is afraid, that my oppressor is in pain, that my oppressor is suffering in a very particular way, and that their suffering is an expression of their violence and their policies that stand in my way. And when I had this conversation with a good friend of mine and told him about this piece, you know, as friends talk, I said, yeah, you know, like, your fucking pain is in my way. And she goes, that's it right there. I said, well, why did I write this whole paragraph? If I could say, your fucking pain is in my way. And I think it goes back to the nature of language, and it goes back to the nature of what we will accept from certain people and how we will not accept that language from a Black man. We would accept it from a woman. And I need to bring language as my tool into the focus of my work, and more words help create the greater abstraction. But really, the less words, so much more truth. There's so much more truth in less words. And so I'm always negotiating with more words and less words, and this is one such example. If you go to this next one, this is less words. Next one, please. This is a few more words. But I love the idea of creating what I call the slow read, which is that it takes time for people to get underneath it. Just for expedience, it says, everything we experienced before anxiety used to be called innocence. Next one. And then this one's more words. And it's also filled with this conceit that I understand a single thought, a single idea or a thought. It's called thought. And the word in the left in the black is the word thought. And through this diagram, I explore a number of sort of visual elements that contribute to an understanding of the way that thought might work inside of this kind of cage or box or brain. And that is to say that my work is a struggle between using less words and more words. And I think that each sort of expression of language has its ideal expression. So I'm always seeking that. And that's why the work is so different. And then also to say that like these 4 pieces that you've seen are actually less typical of most of my work. Most of my work is printed on a Vandercook 219 AB letterpress with historic material and wood type. And these plates were made using a laser cutter and a number of different sort of printing techniques. That these were produced on the same press, but they were produced using a less traditional plate for letterpress, and hardly none of the type in these pieces is actually wood type from the 19th century, which is what I typically work with. That's it, sorry.
I didn't want to interrupt if there was a strong conclusion coming. No, I appreciate that so much, Rick. You know, I appreciate the challenge that is to hear and to think about. And I do wish that everyone could actually see the print because it's beautiful. It's just in its own subtle way.
It's printed with fluorescent yellow ink on very thick red paper, and it's just amazing how much it just sucks in the color and behaves. If you have the portfolio, you've seen it, you've touched it, but it behaves like a tint, like tint varnish, instead of a vibrant color that it is. And I think it goes a long way to sort of express the idea of there are certain things that are holding us back.
And it's actually the experience that you get just from looking at it from just subtly different angles kind of yields different kind of just, I guess, degrees of intensity and stuff with it. So thank you so much for that.
And if I could take a moment just to thank Thomas for his words of sophistication. I really connected to that, and I really appreciate what you were saying about that. And to the other panelists as well, like there were really magical moments in each of your pieces. And Pepe, like thinking about the remix and the recasting of things, that is a very optimistic viewpoint, which I actually think is super valuable as well. And so thank you, and Juarez and Maria and Paula, just beautiful, beautiful words. I appreciate everything you guys did and the work. It's beautiful work.
Oh, couldn't agree more. So I'm going to very quickly run through my piece just to explain kind of the thought that I couldn't shake since the kind of idea for this portfolio came about. And I've just, I guess, wrestled with what is the best way for me to respond to issues that have been going on. And I think the thing that stuck with me that I couldn't shake was just the troubling absence of honestly much of white culture, but specifically the evangelical church. And just looking kind of throughout the history of civil rights in this country, I just feel like at the worst times, and this has been very often. The church has been very complicit in a lot of the injustices that have been taking place. But at the best of times, it's been just merely complacent. And I went through and just collected just a massive folder of historic and contemporary images of just racial injustice. And, and then all the ones where there were people that were, arm in arm, kind of working alongside people of color as they kind of fought for just basic rights. There was almost never people from the white evangelical church. And so I was really struck with the concept of silence is violence. And I think just tried to contrast that with the idea that silence is golden, which is, I think, just where the majority of that particular group was living in, just that the silence that they were living in was the comfort of not having to think about it, not having to do anything about it, and not having to have it affect their lives very much. And so the idea of that was kind of torn away to reveal images that were otherwise whitewashed and kind of diminished to show the reality of what they were. The kind of stereotypical steeple was just comprised of torn Bible pages with verses that all reflect back to the ideas of love and unity and acceptance and things that are really the antithesis of the lives that most of these people were living. And so, like I said, it was something I didn't feel like I could shake, and felt like it was just an important kind of, I guess, mirror to shine back or to reflect back on to a kind of particular subsect that needs to kind of answer for this silence. So that was kind of my piece for this. These are a few other pieces that I've done. I like to deal with issues of race and culture, and in a lot of the work that I do, issues of language barriers, issues of just injustice as well. So I'll stop this share, and didn't want to spend too much time there, but I wanted to also just leave some time for people who may be here, who may have questions for our panel of artists who have shared and the work from this show, and also just some of their other work. So if there's anybody that does have questions, we're trying to monitor the kind of hands raised thing if you want to try and do that, or if you want to just unmute yourself and speak up. I'm sure that we'd love to field the questions.
I actually have a question.
Go ahead, Cam.
So this I guess is for all the artists who are in this show and who are in the Zoom call right now. What are the things that kind of inspire you to make work in general, but specifically, like, how are you able to apply your artistic abilities and also use them in a way to communicate the messages that you did in the show like you did today? Like, what is your process when you're going through this, and like, how are you able to intertwine those thoughts of both, hey, I'm trying to send a message and I'm trying to make something meaningful, but I also want to be able to implicate my abilities and my creative thoughts? How are you able to do that? And like, what's y'all's processes behind it?
There was one thing, I forgot, Jeff, to have you sort of run through the images.
Yeah.
But there's one piece to just speak to that. It's a drawing that I did. It's a portrait of me yelling, but it's a portrait that's drawn on a radiator, which is out of a car. So the inspiration is coming from sort of an object that would generally be a sort of a charged object. Jeff and I sort of connected because we're both kind of motorheads, and I often sort of bring this stuff in my work. But the idea of this radiator is supposed to keep the engine cool. to keep the engine from blowing up, to keep the engine from shutting down. So me sort of putting this expressive image onto this object that's used to kind of suppress or calm down or keep something cool is the inspiration. It's the irony within that, you know, the idea of taking this object that's used to kind of calm you down, but then have something that's put onto it. And it's me literally pressing the veins down onto it to actually allow the drawing to exist. Similar to how if you live in a first floor apartment in North Philly and you had an air conditioner sticking out of the window, somebody was going to tag it. So that's where that active, like, you know, it's like an act of defiance, but it's coming from this purposeful object that comes out of a car.
Very powerful piece.
So in terms of inspiration, it's like, coming from this real space of like Duchamp and the sort of repurposing of objects, it's like, how do you, what's around you that's already charged, and how can you sort of connect with it, you know? And these are these things that, you know, depending on what your background is, what you're interested in, is sort of underneath your nose already, and they just sort of push into another direction. So yeah, so hopefully that answers your question. Like, it's just my way of pushing expression and inspiration. It's through, in some cases, charged objects. And one other thing is, I mean, I do ceramics as well. So there's a piece called Donk Jar. And it's this issue of printmaking, because printmaking can be sort of a temporary, very democratic thing. You know, to send a statement, to say something, but it doesn't necessarily. I mean, the words and the meaning have longevity beyond the paper, but the whole concept is like, what if? What if you dig up the ground after the apocalypse? What are you going to find, right? You find these pottery shards that would last, and then you look at them, and then you start to question, you know, facetiously, what was going on within this civilization here, and what was happening here. Just as you find a lot about Greek culture through its pottery and what was drawn on its pottery. So pushing this thing about our own mortality and how we're sort of dealing with our own mortality all the time through this creative expression, being an artist.
No, that's a great answer. Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Cameron, are you a student?
Yes, I am.
So from my perspective, I suppose it would be helpful to let you know that I have several books that I travel with that are documenting the ideas. And then when opportunities arise, I choose from those ideas to begin working on. And so for you as a student looking for good habits and healthy ways of being productive, my suggestion is, whatever format you do it in, having ideas generate themselves, or having you generate ideas on a separate schedule that to the need to produce work is a healthy way of coming towards when you get called upon to do some work. That way you've got this practice of idea generation, and then you're looking at the various media that you're given access to work with, and seeing what fits with what. And I think Tom's showing his ceramic work is a pretty good example of the idea that, like, not every idea needs to be a poster or a print. Some ideas want to be a ceramic piece, and so on and so forth. But that's just part of my process that I'll share with you.
Thank you. Yeah, that definitely will help me a lot. I'm only a sophomore, so trying to soak everything up, but thank you.
I'd like to piggyback on that idea, in that the sketchbook is an embodiment of the idea of showing up, being present for your work and finding what that means for you. My own process, I'm inclined to get in the studio and start playing. I have sketchbooks of things which may or may not become other ideas, but I'll pursue what interests me. In terms of inspiration, there's inspiration, you know, in life. what things you're drawn to. Speaking with, for me, it's, issues of race, heritage. I'm very interested right now in my lineage and my DNA and what kinds of things, what traits I may have inherited and how that may manifest as art. Say that's just one of a number of interests. I'm very interested right now in kind of keeping a visual COVID journal, just to sort of have a place where there's work that doesn't necessarily have to go into public or anything, just about, hey, how some days it just makes me want to holler and throw up both my hands. So, but that idea of showing up, and for me, that kind of work may manifest in different ways. It may be a poem, it may be music or whatever, but I'm very much committed to that idea of showing up, because you never know how an idea is going to build and how it's going to sort of feed itself. I'm working on a body of little watercolor drawings and things, and yet I was out to it's like, oh, I see some things I could forage, and these things might be printed or stamped or embedded in this work in some way. But if I hadn't started over here, then those flowers might have easily been bypassed. So by showing up, you're creating a space where those ideas can continue to grow and prosper and thrive and eventually become some big masterpiece or whatever. But that idea of constantly filling the well, keeping your chops up, and keeping those mental chops up, those mental, emotional, spiritual chops up. So however you show up, if it's in your sketchbook, if it's at your easel, if it's with your phone, snapping bits of inspiration, allow all those things to feed your inner artist. And that's my 2 cents.
I want to piggyback on what Juarez was saying there is, and my name is Wink. I teach at Stanford as well, and I also have a piece in the show. And that what she was saying is like whole truth. And another thing that I found that fields a lot of the pieces that I do or the work that I work on is experience, and not just experience in like art and the craft, but traveling, seeing sights, absorbing nature, absorbing culture, going to an area of a town you've never been to before, sit down at a local restaurant, have a conversation with someone you've never met before. I can say like some of the early on things that I did in my career don't seem like they line up, being a puppeteer or a dancer or this or that, but traveling and building a bigger me and constantly filling my cup with different experiences in life while taking a look at it from a creative point of view. Like I always keep field notes on my desk or in my back pocket, keeping ideas. But some of the biggest influences came from the fact that I like to build cars, or that I like hip hop dance, or I'm a part of that culture. And doing those things really helped me come up with different ideas and concepts.
It's in my case, for example, I've drawn since I can remember, but I always have a sketchbook with me. I'm always taking notes of everything. I observe people. I love to sit in a little corner and just draw faces and hairdos and the way people dress, the way they walk, because I also do animation. I'm always constantly watching how people move and expressions in their the faces. I love, some of the incredible portraitists, like Rembrandt, who could really capture almost the soul of people. So I'm fascinated by people. So when I'm in an airplane, I'm always drawing people when they are asleep, or in the airports are the best, because people don't know you're drawing them and they're talking on their phones or doing whatever, or sleeping. I love when people just, and also reading. I read a lot. So I think you have to inform yourself by seeing, by living. I mean, you have to have a life in order to, and be, have experiences with all sorts of people. I've given a lot of workshops to children, to young students, to older people, because it really opens the door to so many other experiences. And sometimes you learn from, like, a child can teach you a lot. I'm constantly learning from everybody, because you have to be open to what other people are giving and then using it in your work. So everything informs my work. I'm really terrified by what we're doing to the environment. So I'm working on some environmental pieces, so you have to be open to sensations and to life and try to interpret it. So I think that's what we do as artists, each in their own way. But I'm never bored because I'm always, I have I start about 4 or 5 things at the same time, and I'm constantly working on them as I go and finishing them, because that's important too, not just starting, but finishing. But yeah, it's a process that is time consuming, but it really fills you up, because especially when you do work that touches a nerve and people, you make people think a little. I feel like I'm rewarded.
Thank you very much. And Wink, thank you for your answer too.
Do we have any other questions?
I'm not seeing hand raising if there is any of it happening, but I don't know exactly where to look for it.
I see
Yeah,
Sandra
generally just-
somewhere, Is Sandra still in the conversation? Yeah.
I'm trying to see. I saw her in here earlier, and I was gonna.
Yeah.
Well, I would. Nancy Ariza is in the kind of Zoom audience, and she's also one of our participating artists. So appreciate you joining us tonight as well. And Sandra Fernandez was here as well, but I think she had to leave. But I would like to thank our 6 panelists. I appreciate you guys all coming and sharing of yourself, of your work, answering questions, and just providing some really deep and meaningful insight into what we've seen, and providing us with some challenges to walk away from here thinking about. So I want to thank each of you, and I appreciate Samford for giving us the opportunity to show this work. It will be up through October 22nd at Samford. So if you're in the area, you can definitely, there's a way that you can get on campus to see it. You may need to contact myself or Lauren Evans to do that, but there is a way now that we can let you on campus to look at this. And we've got shows that are going to be coming up in different parts of the country as well, some other galleries. And so hopefully it'll show up at a place that's close to where you may be, so you get a chance to see it. Seeing it online or seeing it on the screen on a Zoom meeting is great, but seeing it in person is just a much more impactful experience. So, so yeah, I thank each of you, and thank everyone who joined us tonight for this conversation. And I hope that conversations like this will continue to happen around this work and just in general. So, Lauren, did you have anything you needed to add, or?
I think you covered it. Thank you to you, Jeff, for organizing this and making this a reality.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Well, thank you all, and to everyone, have a great night.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.